Welcome everybody. Today we're going to talk about live plants. I know a lot of times I kind of gloss over it. I've done it for so many years, and the best way I can explain it is I'm kind of that gardener down the road that might have an awesome yard and you're a little bit jealous of, but I'm not entering into the state fair, check out the rose I grew, or anything like that. So I want to keep it down on a easy to understand level today. What I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to answer questions, going to cover some basics, and then I'm going to take you through the website. And I think the reason why I'm going to the website, twofold. I want to sell a bunch of stuff. Second thing, it's kind of like a list of plants I can talk about, right? I myself have never been huge into aquascaping, and when I say aquascaping, that might mean a very high level of competition. That being said, I like my tanks to look good, and I like to position where plants go, but I'm not setting up a scape to tear it down 3 days after the picture like kind of the aquascaping does. So I'm all into sustainability. Can I keep this going? I like minimal maintenance, and so all the advice I give today will be that. So for most of you, that will hit home. You're gonna go, yes, that sounds like me. I have to go to work every day. I can't spend 5 hours. I don't have $1 million to spend on this. All that stuff is gonna apply to what we're gonna talk about. So I believe that substrate is not that big of a factor. Now, can you get a little bit of benefit out of something like an ADA soil or a fluval soil? Yes, a little bit. Can you get a little bit of benefit out of maybe a dirted tank? Yes. But with all these things where you get a benefit, you also get a negative too. And that might be extra ammonia. It might be way more nutrients than you can use. Like it's common to see someone get this high-end substrate and then load their tank with a Nubius and can't figure out why they have an algae farm. Well, they have a really slow-growing plant and they have tons of nutrients. You put those two together and you've made an algae farm. Substrates, yes, could we use a fluorite or something like that to boost iron? We could. We could use an Eco-Complete. We could use crushed coral. We can use normal gravel. We can use pink gravel. So maybe pink gravel reviewed as you can't grow plants and that you'd have to be insane, right? I don't think that's any more true than, oh, you can grow plants in sand. Like, I actually view it harder to grow plants in sand than it would be pink gravel. Any substrate, you should be able to have a full-on planted tank. You're just going to have different challenges. And then when it comes to lighting, I believe we're at a point now where most lighting is so good. I fear that like when a Fluval 4.0 comes out, it's going to be a hard sales pitch of like, what is it that's that much better? Oh, it's brighter? It's brighter than I need to be already. Like, I'm using a Fluval 3.0 on a 40-inch tall tank. And like on smaller tanks, it's really bright. And so without injecting CO2, you kind of run into some algae problems. Nitro lights, Aquaneat lights, a lot of these things are very, very bright for what they are. And then with the kits, we're getting the opposite. They are still LED, but they're dialing them down so much so they don't grow algae. And when it comes to light, we think of it incorrectly. We think of it like sun rays, and really we should be thinking about it like raindrops. So if we pour a bunch of water onto something, the water collects, right? Whereas sun rays, we don't really see it building up. We just think of it as a stagnant thing. And so with lighting, we can play with it a little bit. If we had really, really intense light for 4 hours, that might be the same as half as much light at 8 hours. And so for the most part, if you've bought yourself a decent planted light, you will be okay. If you're buying anything that was kind of made in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's specifically targeted towards plants, and you've done any research of like name of light, planted tank, reviews, boom, you're gonna get at least a few people's opinions, and you'll see the tanks they've grown, and you go, hey, if they can do that, I at least know it's capable, maybe I'll be able to do that. CO2, we should probably cover that. 90% of plants won't require CO2. What CO2 does, and this is my own general explanation again, is it speeds up how fast it grows. If I go to the gym and I work out every single day, I'm going to build muscle mass. If I take steroids, I will do that at a much faster pace. Now, when I stop taking steroids, you will lose that muscle mass much faster as well. The same thing happens in a planted aquarium. We can grow plants at a moderate rate, and then when we apply CO2, that all happens faster. If we run out of light or we run out of nutrients, we can kill them faster because everything's happening faster. They grow faster, they die faster, all of that. We're going to switch to the website view, if you will. All right. So we have the website. If you've never been to our website, shame on you. It's the coolest place to hang out. That's not true. But even if you don't live in our country, you could at least go and play with like the Murphy camera, which is down here. But we're going to focus on the live plants today. So the first thing I want to show you is that there are ways to break down lights on our website. And this can be done, it's a little bit harder to find, but even on the mobile version, you can start choosing by like, oh, low light plants, and it will resort for you, or red plants. So low light and red even technically bring up some options. You can get rid of, the low light. So we've got sorting features. Now we've only got about 60 different species of plants. I have access to thousands of species, but these are my handcrafted, chosen plants that I think most people will be successful with. Now there's lots of other plants, but if 8 out of 10 of you will kill it, I'm not sure I want to be in the business of selling you plants you're going to kill. So I've focused on ones that I think you'll be successful with. The way the plants are naturally sorted on our website is most sold will be at the top. So Vallisneria are the #1 sold plant. I've used it in a lot of tanks, and I've spoken about it at length many times in many videos, and I've written articles about it. And that is, I love it because if you were only ever going to buy one aquarium plant, I would buy Vallisneria. Once it gets established and it starts growing, it will fill up your whole tank, and you get this nice jungle look to it. Something like this. This is from a tank at the shop. The other benefits to Val is it will grow in sand technically once it finally gets established. It doesn't like it as much as normal gravel, but it will grow. And it's a native to like Lake Tanganyika and Lake Malawi, basically African cichlids. You can have it with African cichlids. It can normally take a beating of a goldfish as well. And so it's a very hardy plant that will reproduce for you so long as we give it nutrients and we give it light. Vallisneria can grow as tall as 8 feet if you went for the jungle val version. This technically is Vallisneria Italian, which basically means it gets about 4 feet. The next one would be Pogostemon stellatus octopus. It's a good plant for if you're breeding fish or so it is a stem plant. To replant it, you just cut it and stick it in the gravel. It'll grow some new roots. You could float it and then it grows all these weird roots that will just hang down. It looks kind of weird. You can see that we do inject CO2 in all the warehouse aquariums, so we're trying to convert it as fast as possible for you. Stem plant, very fast grower, gets more spindly when it fully grows in. Great plant. You can almost neglect it. I say almost because you'll get a real bad algae farm if you don't take care of it at all. I would say this is more of a community tank plant, not so much African cichlids or goldfish, that type of thing. Monte Carlo. And why are they buying so many Monte Carlo at a time? That's because it's a carpeting plant. And so it's going to give you that nice carpet effect on your gravel or your substrate. And that's that lawn that a lot of people see in the aquascapes that they kind of lust after. The way I personally recommend to plant this, which is different than everyone else, I personally recommend planting the pot into the gravel and just letting the, kind of all the parts that have grown over the sides of that pot lay on the gravel. Eventually they'll root and just spread out. Now, this is a plant that you don't want a ton of digging fish in. Definitely not goldfish. Definitely not African cichlids. This is purely that I'm going for an aquascape look. So Java fern is great for anything that's going to dig a lot. So the polar opposite of what we just had. Also is a low light plant. So it literally is the polar opposite here. The rhizome of this thing needs to be above the gravel, or ideally this is best suited tied or glued onto wood or rock. Liquid fertilizer is really what you want to use. A lot of potassium helps. Easy Green is high in potassium. We basically built Easy Green to really make plants like this super duper easy. So right on the screen in the center of that picture, you can see those little brown dots. Those little brown dots are, I guess, seeds or spores or whatever you want to call the starts of Java ferns. When this plant gets distressed, so meaning it's not getting enough food or enough light, it thinks it's going to die, those seeds will sprout into baby little Java fern plants. And from there, you could pull those off and plant them. One of the ways to propagate. The other way is let that rhizome just grow along and make cuts. This is a very slow growing plant. It's common for it to get out-competed by faster growing plants. So maybe you had this and you had that Pogostemon stellatus octopus we looked at a couple plants ago. That grows really fast, eats a ton of food, maybe not leaving anything on the table for the Java fern. So that's something to think about. Anubias nanopetite is on deck. It's an Anubias, which means it's a rhizome plant, much like the Java fern we talked about a little bit before. And we want to attach it to wood or rock, and it stays fairly compact. So you can get this nice, dense growth. It almost looks like a carpet over rocks and wood. Typically, it's a little expensive at $9.99. You don't get a whole lot. and it's very slow growing. But when it comes to really slow growing plants, what's nice is it also dies really slowly. If you're going on vacation a lot, you're out of town a lot, you forget to fertilize a lot, give it some food and it'll perk back up over time. We've got Cryptocorin Wind Deadeye. When you're going to plant in the gravel, it will make little runners under and then pop up a new plant. Relatively slow grower. Can take a long time to settle in. Notorious for melting back. Know that when you're buying plants, you're buying basically roots. Whereas stem plants, you're just buying like someone grabbed it, cut it, threw it in a pot. It'll root out in a few days. Don't worry about it. But on these things like Anubias and Java ferns and crypts and swords, all that, you're basically buying root structures. That's what you really care about. Amazon swords, definitely immerse grown. So these big wide leaves, that is not how an Amazon sword looks underwater. Once it comes back in, it's going to have narrower leaves that are a little bit pointier. What we want to do is we want to get it out of that pot and out of that rock wool and put it into gravel and load it up with root tabs. Once those roots start locking on to where all those nutrients are, you're going to get a lot of growth out of that. It sends out a spike. And so what that means is like a runner out into the water. It's going to have a bunch of baby plants that grow from it. I wouldn't recommend it with plecos. So plecos typically like to eat on this plant. These big broad leaves, it goes, ooh, let me eat that. Hopefully you guys can get enough info from the descriptions we've written. We've done a bunch of pre-selecting for you to make it as easy as possible. It kind of boils down to if you use root tabs and use Easy Green and use a Fluval 3.0, if you do those things, it's nearly impossible to not grow a bunch of these plants. When you have that groundwork laid, you pretty much will be successful for the most part. Like, you could just really be bad, but no, if you at least know you have all the tools to be successful, at least if I have all the ingredients to make a pizza, I'm much more likely to make one that I'd want to eat versus not knowing anything about making pizza dough or pizza sauce. You know, you might be putting hot dogs on there. I want to make a video about that. Hot dog pizza.
We hope you enjoyed this video. To watch another one just like this, click here.